Thank you, Larry. Once again, I'm Jim Hagen, and President of the Olympic Stewardship Foundation. Before I begin, I'd just like to say I'm honored to be up here with Bill Miller, who I served with on the Planning Commission. And, we sometimes have differing perspectives on things, but I've always admired his work ethic and a tremendous amount of volunteer time. There's a few other people on the Planning Commission here tonight, and I feel the same way toward them. Larry's already touched on it. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Larry's already touched on it about the importance of this kind of exchange. Just about 3 years ago, we were engaged in kind of a companion ordinance, the critical areas ordinance. And there's a lot of parallels. There was not a lot of public knowledge leading up to the release of the new regulations, and then a contentious public hearing, and just a lot of questions that people had. And the nature of the process is, as Larry said, it's a one-sided thing. People can make comments in that formal setting, but they can't get their questions answered. And at that time, when I was chairman of the Planning Commission, we attempted to set up a similar forum where we would invite staff from DCD and the commissioners and who else, and have a question and answer and exchange to try to diffuse. You always hear talk about the misinformation and the myths. And we thought, boy, what a great opportunity to try to dispel some of that. Well, that didn't happen, and I think that just sort of, that controlled environment kind of sustains some of these tensions that we see carrying to this day with the Shoreline Master Program. So,
Here.
one of the things that we've heard, in fact, is from some committee members on the shoreline. You have to understand that the committee process leading up to the draft goes back kind of parallel to the critical areas ordinance. So that's one of the reasons, for instance, I didn't participate in this committee. I was tied up with the critical areas ordinance, and I'm like most of you. I work, and I don't just for this Shoreline Master Program. If you want to follow up, you got to read this, and then a whole binder full of statutes. So, a lot of us, who don't work in the field, who aren't working for state agencies or aren't in environmental groups or environmental organizations, a good part of our days are tied up. So we aren't able to attend this, and I find it interesting that some of the people on the committee were resentful that a lot of us in the public showed up at the last minute to complain about this, when the last minute was the opening of the formal public comment period.
Here.
And it was almost as though the public was kind of intruding on what the committee had already done.
Here.
And another thing that we heard is, and I've been very grateful to the Planning Commission and the Planning Commission chairman for requesting and getting extensions for this public period. But one of the things we've heard is, well, we're out of money. And I'm thinking, well, you spent all the money during the committee process, but didn't you save any for us, for the public? And I think that's one of the things that's characteristic of this process that I have questions about and disagreements with, is from my perspective, what I see is almost a culture of, if not bias, and assumption, really without investigation, that human activity is inherently negative on the shoreline. And I think that those sort of attitudes were what really prevailed during the committee process. And it was during the committee process that all of these documents that we're now reviewing were drafted. And there were, frankly, statements made in public, things like, people may need to re-examine their ideas of what they think they can do on the shoreline as to whether or not they can build a home there. Or we want to get people off the bluff. Or when asked why the committee went beyond what they had to do by law, we saw an opportunity and we took it. All of these at the expense of landowners. So when we hear assurances that that respect and concern for the landowners was a factor, it's a little hard to believe that there wasn't a predetermined outcome for this. And it's frankly biased against people. Our organization was formed as a result of the aftermath of the Critical Areas Ordinance. And it is our firm belief, we care very much about the ecological, environmental health of the shoreline. We have members who actively participate on their own dollar in putting conservation on the ground. And we also advocate that landowners are the best stewards of the land. And one of the reasons that we believe that is it's imperative that landowners be active partners, that there be an adult relationship between the regulations and the people affected by those relationships. And that any regulating authority that is in conflict with the people that it's regulating is doomed to failure. So we actually look at this as not a property rights issue, but this is actually good conservation is completely dependent on a healthy partnership with the landowners. That's really kind of the position of Olympic Stewardship Foundation. We feel that philosophy was not manifested by the committee, that the committee really engaged in environment first, and the people were secondary. And that is really not what the goal of the Shoreline Management Act is. It's to create a balance between protection and use, with the ultimate goal being no net loss to the shoreline functions. So, before I get into some of the details of the policy and the regulations themselves, that is really kind of the overriding characteristic that we see of this draft, is that it does create that adversarial position, the environment versus the people. The people need to be micromanaged. They certainly are going to do something harmful. There is, again, that assumption that human activity in and of itself is bad.